It starts with narration by a lady and a book, as we see, and she's telling us about a beautiful girl who grew up in a convent by the edge of the sea. No father, no mother. Her name is Mary Joseph. She doesn't know where she came from. She's in love with water and swimming. Also, she is not allowed to by the convent's nuns' restricted rules. They try their best to shelter her from the world. Meanwhile, at the Palace of Versailles, France by the way, King Louis XIV has recently returned from a victorious but expensive war. As he starts to give a speech for his audience about the war which has ended after a long time, he gets shot in an attempt by his enemies, which makes him worried and think about his mortality, and his doctor suggests a solution for that problem, which is mermaid. They have to find and catch a female mermaid, and the procedure involves cutting out the creature's heart during an eclipse to give the king immortality. Also, the father priest believes it's against the nature and God, but he's the king, like why they don't give it a try? So with that, the king commissions a risky task to find the lost city of under Atlantic water where mermaids are living. The captain for this dangerous mission is a courageous, handsome man. After much struggle and fighting with waves and a storm, they manage to catch 2 mermaids. One of them is male. They release the male one and keep the female, and send message back to the king about their success. The doctor receives the message of mermaid is coming, and once again, the king's minister and the father perhaps shows his disapproval. He has a serious doubt about it, which makes him check on some bunch of stuffs about what the doctor claims to be true. And later on he receives a letter, in fact a reply to his letter that he has sent to convent. On Mary Joseph, the king's daughter, returned to palace after years. The king wants her for eclipse and sacrifice day, also for her music of course, as she's wondering where and why she is invited to the palace by the king. But she doesn't know about the king being his father. In fact, she doesn't know anyone being as her father. On the way to the palace, she asks the father if he serves the king. He's like, I work for the king and serves the god. She's like, I am going to meet the king or god. The palace is like dream and magnificent, the word she is trying to find, and the father helps her with. They give her a servant named Megali. She is quite friendly and advises Mary Joseph about the rules and the people around the king. The king wakes up by the music as usual, and he's like, boring. The priest is like, go and play your own music, which makes him being forced to find a fresh composer ASAP. Instant regret. Then it's time for confession and forgiveness. The king confesses about last night, and the women he is not sure about their names, but father helps him wonder how the father knows their names better. Anyway, he is forgiven. After a day, the minister shows some of Mary's music composers. King Louis wants her for tomorrow to play music for him and mentions that no one must know she is his daughter. The following days, son of a wealthy man who his father is heavily ill and ready to pass away comes for giving his gratitude and brings the king some birthday present. The king doesn't like birthday present though, because it makes him think about his end. So the wealthy man in the town is dying, as his son said earlier, and the king and his minister are talking about some plans they have to come up with for the boy and his wealth. Next we see Mary Joseph, the king's daughter, strolling around the palace wide open yard with her servant, now that she is her friends also. Everybody is staring at her. Megali says they don't have any job except gossiping and jealousy. As she is staring to a female statue, the king shows up to meet her. She gets surprised and panics and falls in the pool as a result. The wealthy guy, Jean Michel, helps her and pull her out of the water, and the King Louis gives her his cloak and says she doesn't need to be ashamed. That statue has caused many to lose their balance, mostly men. That statue is his wife, which to marry is her mother. He tells her to be ready with her new composer next day for the king. For that, she's got to have all the magnificent, as she says, dress and musical instruments to choose from. We see Captain with his men are taking the mermaid to a pond kind of place to keep it there till the eclipse day to sacrifice. Father and the doctor are debating on how the mermaid is supposed to give eternal life, and Louis the king shuts them up and orders them to prepare the creature he wants to see it. Doctor goes to get the mermaid ready. Mermaid doesn't want to eat or show itself though. Captain says she's heartbroken. Yeah, she has feeling and soul, as Captain presumes. The king promises reward if he keeps the mermaid healthy until the day comes, but if he fails, the dark cell is waiting for him. At night, Mary is working on her music she is supposed to play for the king in the very morning, but she is struggling to find a good one. Suddenly, she hears a deep and sad melody. It's the mermaid who is calling her. She grabs her music instrument and rushes to mermaid. The mermaid shows up, then the captain interrupts them. She says the mermaid called her there. Captain is like, I hear dolphins and whales. Mary got her composer perfect in the morning for king, and he loves it. Then confession and forgiveness as usual, but he can't remember the details from last night, and he's forgiven anyway. Later on, there is a royal gathering and feast in Grand Hall of Palace. She enters the hall. King admires her look and her music earlier in the morning and asks her for another composition for celebrating the eclipse. The wealthy guy, Michel L'Intellect, comes up to introduce himself to Mary, then maybe some dance. But Mary is reluctant about dancing, saying she doesn't know anything about dancing. Then King himself helps her with that. As they are doing it, she reminds him of his wife. Mary apologizes for being sloppy, but King says it wasn't her fault. At night, they have some firework, and Mary is talking to Mermaid about the awesome day she had at the Grand Hall. Captain shows up and Mermaid disappears. Mary is like, something about you make her scared, maybe because you feed her dead fish. Next, as she is walking around, notices the king is having his alone time and painting. The project he's working on is his wife, of course. He talks about the Grand Hall incident and says Mary is the only one who reminds him of his wife. Another time, the wealthy man in the town has finally passed away, and his son needs the king's approval and signature perhaps for placing his father's wealth in his name. Besides, he's being announced to the people officially by the king. At dinner party, Captain and L'Intellect, the rich guy, having some verbal clashes, but King shuts them up. It's mostly because of Mary. She likes the captain, kind of. Later on that night, Mermaid calls Mary again. She visits her. They are having some moments. Captain interrupts them again, and she disappears. Next day, they all go hunting. Captain and Mary like to ride horses. Then a shot from Hunter distracts her and she falls off the horse and broke her arm as a result. The doctor wants to amputate her arm, but the father and the king recommend to wait till next day. The captain is mad and blaming himself for Mary. Then Mermaid calls him to bring Mary to her. Captain takes Mary to Mermaid and leaves her in the water. She shows up and starts to circulate around Mary. Next day, the king wakes up and notices Mary playing music with her perfectly healed arm. And Mary is confused what they want from Mermaid. She doesn't know the main purpose of King. She thinks the mermaid is there for curing people's illness and thanks the king. Until later, the captain tells her the mermaid is for king, not for people. But before he could explain it further, she says she knows the king and she's not that naive. Then they have some moments walking around. Also, Michel notices them and rushes to the king to complain. But before he can tell what he wants, the king says he wants him to marry his daughter, Mary Joseph. And he's like, that's what I was about to cry about. Mary visits the mermaid again and she gives her a ride around. On the way back, she encounters the father. He tells her that the king asked to see her. The king tells everything she needs to know and admits that he's a terrible father, but it's not enough for Mary. She rejects getting married Michel, but her father says she doesn't get to agree, she can just obey, and she admits to marry apparently. She is heartbroken. The father visits the mermaid. They have some moments of their own. Then comes to the doctor to convince him to forget about his theory and free the mermaid because she is likely a human kind of creature. Plus, immortality is against nature and God. But the doctor threatens him to stay out of his way. Mermaid calls Mary once again. She tells her about the time she got hunted by the captain and has family. The mermaid is at its best condition to be sacrificed, the doctor says. And the priest tries for the last time to dissuade the king on sacrificing the mermaid. But king refuses and says he doesn't have knowledge, so he better not to talk. Then the father gives up his position and takes off the cross that king has given him. The captain sneaks into the doctor lab and notices all his tools and plans for the eclipse day. He takes one of his surgical procedures and shoves it into Mary's room to let her know what is the plan with Mermaid. As Mary is not in her room, she's in the pond talking to Mermaid about tomorrow. And Captain gets caught by the doctor and taken to a dark cell. Later on, Mary comes back to her room and notices what is supposed to happen in the next day. In early morning, as her band playing music for the king, she comes and breaks all the stuffs and says no music for king today. She goes to the king and tells him that they can't kill the mermaid. If the king agrees to return the mermaid to the sea, she will consent to the marriage, but king wants them both. Also, she yells at her father, but not able to convince him though. As the soldiers are taking the captain to drain the water so that they prepare the mermaid for sacrificing, they tell him it's Mary's wedding day. Mary begs father to help her and mermaid before getting ready and dressing for wedding. She dresses up and thanks her friend for everything. Father comes to take Mary out of her room so that she can run away with mermaid. She manages to get at the pond and sees captain and his men are draining the water. She tries her best to encourage the captain and to release the mermaid, but he is too committed to give up on his task. After she tells him that she doesn't love to marry that rich guy and that if she doesn't escape with the mermaid, she has to marry him and not the captain, then he accepts to help her and they kiss as the mermaid is happily looking at them. Then the doctor shows up and tries to stop them. He shoots the captain. Captain falls into the water and mermaid jumps over in the canal, then in the sea, as carrying the captain with her. Mary ties the doctor to a wheel which pulls him down in the water. The eclipse is happening. Everyone is waiting for ceremony, but they all has escaped. The king with some of his men starts chasing them. Mary arrives to the location where she is supposed to meet the captain and the mermaid, but King gets to her first. She threatens him that she will jump and tells him she wants to jump and will die. The mermaid gets to the point after, and King has to decide whether he would kill the mermaid or he let her to revive his daughter. She jumps, the mermaid remains still and waits for the king to decide. King finally gives up and gives her to revive his daughter, then she can go. Captain is back to life by mermaid as well. The father admires Louis for being a good king, and now he is a good father and a great man. The last shot is about Mary and the captain are searching for mermaid place. They arrive at the point where there is city beneath the ocean and the mermaids.